8:30, I think, is stunning. Could I have a wee shout out possibly for who's come through from Edinburgh, all that way? Good, excellent, all right. And who's come through from Glasgow? Excellent, that's brilliant, because you've been up very, very early. And Aberdeen? Oh, one or two in the room for Aberdeen. Well, thanks to all of you for coming along today. We're really pleased to have you all. Just a few housekeeping things. Can I please ask you all to turn your phones to silent? Anybody whose phone goes off will give 50 quid to a charity of my choice. There's no fire alarm planned for today, so if fire alarms go, please use the exits, which are predominantly behind you. I think there may be exits here as well. And toilets are out the doors and to your right or downstairs. I'd like to give a particular thanks today to a number of people who helped to make today's event happen. About this time last year, David Christensen from, from Lockheed Martin came and saw us and said, we used to have a developers conference in Scotland, it seems to have died. Can you help us recreate that? So this morning is the first attempt to do that. I'd like to thank David particularly. I know he's not here today, but I think colleagues from Lockheed Martin are. And without your help and support, we wouldn't have got to where we are today. I'd also like to thank everyone who's been cajoled, volunteered, and had their arms put up their back to speak today. Again, without you, we wouldn't be able to make it happen. And a particular thanks to all our sponsors this morning. Without them, we can't finance this, so that's terrific as well. And our sponsors this morning are the Data Lab, Code Clan, IOMART, and Skills Development Scotland. Thank you all for your support. I believe they're going to put the programme up behind me in a minute, so bear with us while we do that. We're splitting into 3 streams. Some of the talks will be in here, some of the talks will be in the Glam suite, and some of the talks will be in the Stirling suite. And if I get this right, the Glam suite is back down to the reception and to your left, and the Stirling suite is downstairs. You should have your programmes, if you registered in time, on the back of your tickets, like that. And if you haven't, you're going to have to ask the team on reception. Okay, so you probably heard enough from me. This is your morning. I very much hope you're going to enjoy it. I hope you'll be able to take something away from it. We had 3 themes: inspire, learn and play. And as you may have noticed as you came in, there's a play section just over to my right, your left, with drones and robots and various things. So do have fun with those, but also do enjoy the talks and do participate in them. Our primary sponsor this morning is the Data Lab, and I would like to invite Gillian Davidson to the stage to give a sponsor's address. Gillian.
Good morning. I'm delighted to be here. I'm Gillian Docherty from the Data Lab, and we are delighted to be the first sponsor of this new Developers Conference. And it's great to see so many people in the room for this first part of what's going to be a very exciting day. So a lot of you might wonder who the Data Lab is. We are part of an Innovation Centre programme that was set up by the Scottish Funding Council around 2.5 years ago. We have investment of over £11.3 million to invest to help organisations in Scotland, both commercial and public sector, leverage data science and analytics in their organisations. If you look at companies who do that, those who make the best use of their data, they are likely to be more than 20% better in all financial metrics compared to their competitors. And it's a growing environment. So with that funding, we're going to focus on delivering 3 things to the Scottish economy. One is collaborative innovation projects, where we have funding to invest to help organisations deliver new data science capability and techniques into their business. And we work with the academic network across the 6 universities to help do that. We have an extensive skills and talent programme across delivering MScs, PhDs, executive education in big data and online learning. And you'll see more of that capability being rolled out. Our first 40 sponsored MSc students begin this month, and we're looking for industry partners to take those MSc students on secondment for placement next year, and we're doing that in conjunction with ePlacement Scotland, part of ScotlandIS. So if you're interested in that programme, please come and see us at the stand. We also have a stream around community building, workshops, conferences, sandpits, hackathons, and you'll begin to see us more present, shall we say, across that landscape in Scotland. So we're fortunate to have some of the best data in the world in Scotland, and we're in the great position of being able to link that to drive significant benefit for public service improvement as well. So we also work with public sector. So come and see us at the stand. I'm going to finish on a quote. A 1900s poet called Andrew Lang once said, "A politician uses statistics the way a drunk uses a lamppost, for support rather than illumination." So let us help you leverage your data to drive illumination in your business. So come and talk to us at the stand. That's all from us this morning. Have a fantastic day. What I will say, I'm just going to hand over to the team that's going to be based here in the Edinburgh suite. So as Polly said, we've got the Edinburgh suite here, and this is for the session Designing for Mobile. So if you've got that on the back of your ticket, you have to stay here. If you have Building Inclusive Products for People with Disabilities, that's in the Stirling suite. And if you have Ruby, that's in the Glamis suite. So I would like to invite up to the stage just now, and then we'll let the teams go that are going to the other electives. Michael, FanDuel, Duncan, Blair, and Kate, I believe, who is going to host the session this morning in here. So if you would like to come up, and we'll let everyone else that are going to the other sessions, please make your way to the particular room. Thank you very much. Enjoy your day.
We'll get the middle seat.
Perfect. Who's after leaving? Everybody's leaving.
I know, eh? Seems kind of strange, actually, to have, I don't know, have us up on stage while everyone's leaving.
Great, I've got my watch kicking
You're
on.
the timer.
Okay,
Good
shall we
you.
start? People filtering out?
Don't know, I guess we'll give that a minute.
That's down.
Well,
So we'll take a photo. Okay. Okay, morning everyone. Good morning. Oh no! Come closer. Come closer. We don't bite. Honest. Okay, great. Okay, so morning everyone, and welcome to the session on designing for mobile. So we've got two great speakers today, Duncan and Michael, and so welcome and be very excited for this session. So just to let you know about the format, so we'll have about 30 minutes of discussion to start off with between Michael and Duncan. And then we've got 15 minutes Q&A, so think of your questions. We really want to try and get a sense of what you're thinking and get your questions answered. So let's move on to introductions. So my name's Kate Ho. I'm currently Head of Product at the Scottish Government in the Digital Public Services team. And can I invite Duncan to
hi everybody, really pleased to be here. My name's Duncan Blair. I am the Mobile Product Manager at FanDuel. Prior to that I was a designer and acting head of design at Kotakan, which was a mobile development consultancy.
Great, Michael?
Yeah, I'm Michael Hayes, founder of AddJam. We do mobile development mainly. We're over in Glasgow. We've been working with Glasgow City Council quite a lot in the Future City project. We founded that 18 months ago. So yeah, it's my background.
Brilliant. Okay, so I thought we'd kick off the session with a bit of back to basics. So what's your definition of design?
It's quite a wide one. Definition of design. Just make it look pretty. No, I think we definitely all agree that it's a lot more than that. And I think, you know, wider than how it looks is how it works. You know, actually getting back to what are we building and how does it behave? How do users interact with it? And then even stepping a little bit higher than that as well is the why behind that. You know, what is the purpose of what you're actually building? So, yeah, once you've done all that, then also making it look pretty.
At the end of that.
Yeah.
And Michael?
Yeah, it's the thing of a product's more than it's skin deep, it's what's inside. Everything that's not natural is, everything man-made is designed, so design's all around us, but just because it's all around us doesn't mean it's always good. So with mobile, you're presented with a lot of challenges, your screen real estate, the devices get less power than you would get elsewhere. So your mobile is just creating well, for me, in the context of mobile, is creating an experience, fitting for the use case, the thing that's in your hand, in your pocket.
So you have to take account of much more of the wider context when you're designing for mobile, is that right?
Yeah. When you're, like for us, we had an app that had a lot of rich media in it, and it was based on for tourists. So it gave us a lot of challenges in how we cache the data and store it locally. That typically you wouldn't even think about it doing a website because there's a connection, you're guaranteed it. So yeah, you have to be. You have to think of all the different use cases that device that's out in the wild can take you to.
Great. And also the other part of that is around what's your definition of mobile, especially when we're considering there's phablets now, which are hybrids between phones and tablets, and then there's tablets itself.
Yeah, I mean, I would go wider than that as well, actually. I think, the obvious thing when you think of mobile is phones, right? That's kind of what comes to mind. Everyone thinks that's the device in your pocket. But I think when we're talking about mobile, we should be talking a lot wider than that. Tablets is the obvious extension, but beyond that as well, we've got wearables.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, indeed, indeed. And then, it goes wider than that as well. I would say that mobile is really any technology that it's more contextual. It's technology that comes to you or is there where you need it. It's more about ubiquitous technology rather than, you having to go to your desktop computer, sit there and work with that. I would consider the kind of embedded technology in some sort of bus stop with a signage that you can interact with or something to find a route, which bus should you be getting to take you somewhere. That I would consider mobile. I would consider smart TV, the growth of smart TV, somewhat mobile as well, because it's technology where you need it, right? You're watching TV, you're not then having to get up and go to do something else. The technology is being built into the area or the location where you actually need it.
So, I'll ask the same question to Michael. What's your definition of mobile?
Well, I disagree that a TV's mobile. Someone who walked down the street with a 55-inch Samsung. Mobile is more than just your phone. Like I've got my watch on. I've seen like my mum and dad, people who I always have my mum test when I come to do a product, but my mum, because she just doesn't get technology in general, and that's a stereotype, but it's true with her. But she uses a Fitbit, and it's fundamentally changed her life, and how healthy she is and how active she is, and that's a mobile device, and we can build on top of that, and yeah, mobile can touch lots of areas. It's not just your phone.
Yeah, well, that both of you kind of touched on, I think, the idea around wearables and even linking around the Internet of Things. So one of the things that I've done recently is bought a Nest fire alarm, and I was having dinner in Fife one night, and I got a alert, and someone had burnt the toast in my flat, and I thought that was quite amusing to be able to know that your other half had burnt the toast.
I was going to say, you do live with somebody, right?
Yeah,
that would be the more worrying
really
thing.
awkward. Yeah. So leading on to that and thinking about that wider kind of context, what do you think are the opportunities around mobile in the next coming months or even next coming years, especially with all the announcements that Apple has made recently?
I think there's massive opportunities in mobile. I mean, if people are just kind of getting into mobile, there's all these things that you don't normally get access to with mobile, right? I mean, just talking purely from data inputs and sensors, right? You've got a microphone, you've got a front-facing camera and a rear camera, you've got touch input, you've got things like fingerprint sensors now, you've got all sorts of sensors that you can get data from, and if you're designing for desktop computers, you normally don't have access to that. So,
can you give me a good example or outstanding example of an app that you've seen where they've used maybe some of those sensors to really good effect?
So there's actually one just came up there on the slides, I noticed.
Go for it.
And it's Dark Sky, so it's a weather app. And they do like insanely accurate weather predictions. Like to the minute they can notify you it's going to rain, which is fantastic, living in Glasgow. But they've also got, every iPhone has got a barometer in it. So they've now got a global network of weather stations with people walking about with their phone in their pocket. So the data that you can gather, the predictions, it's only going to get better.
So that's a really good example. Are there anything, any other opportunities beyond sensors?
I think definitely beyond sensors. I mean, the fact it is so contextual, right? It's always on you. So wherever you are, you're going to have those, have that there, and that's not just true of phones, right? Like with wearables and things as well. So I think that one of the great things about that is being able to know where users are and make use of that information to provide timely and meaningful data. You can use these things to actually predict what the user is going to want to know and what they're going to want to interact with. You don't have to have an app that just always launches in the same way. You can make use of the data that you have about the user, where they are, and actually predict, they're at this bus stop, and you're let's say Lothian Buses or something app. You're at this bus stop. You almost certainly want to see the bus times. You can surface that based on that sensor data, based on the user's context. So I think there's some really useful stuff that can be done, and I think people are taking good use of it. But there's definitely more opportunities there.
And Michael, what do you think are the kind of exciting opportunities around mobile at the moment? Or
Yes.
soon?
So I see the iPhone, the Apple Watch, has got as big. You have activity trackers, like I mentioned, the Fitbit, and how it impacted my mother. But the Apple Watch has taken it a step further with heart rate monitors, and it's. I think going forward, that can only improve. There'll be it allows you to get a better sense of you. So like my wee brother's a diabetic, so if he could have something on his wrist, it could. Apparently, he can do it. He can measure blood sugar from sweat. So if he could passively measure his blood sugar, imagine how that will change his life, just by wearing a wearable on your wrist. So I think the ability for these sensors and collecting data, and then doing the learning on that and presenting it to the user in a meaningful way, can have huge impacts on so many aspects of life. It's not just about taking selfies and getting the bus times. There's real fundamental things that can change individual lives. But then imagine the impact on NHS spend, and it goes on and on.
And what about? So I was going to quickly ask, what about challenges? What are the biggest challenges, very quickly, on mobile compared to designing for the web or designing for desktop?
Yeah, I mean, I guess one of the obvious ones, if we're talking about mobile with phones and with wearables, you've got this really limited screen space compared to if you're coming from designing for the web, and that's it's the kind of the most obvious challenge. Like, oh God, how do we cram all this into this tiny screen? But it's actually really more of an opportunity. It's an opportunity to get back to basics on what the user actually wants to achieve. You don't need to cram everything on there. You really don't, and you really shouldn't try. So, and again, with that the ability to be more contextual, you can achieve that. And I think one of the other challenges really is that because of the way people actually interact with mobile, and you're not sitting at a desktop computer, you're normally using it out in the real world. So it's actually fitting around the user's life. You normally only have a few seconds really to engage the user and let them achieve what they're trying to do. You don't want to have them, digging through dozens of screens to try and get whatever it is they need, because there's a good chance they need it right now.
Yeah.
So finding ways to really efficiently get to what the user is trying to do, and work within that tiny little time window that you've got their attention is a challenge.
Okay. So, I mean, there's lots of platforms out there at the moment. It's a big topic. Having worked in mobile before, one of the first questions that a client asks is, what should I be building on? iOS, Android, what about Windows Phone? The occasional question about BlackBerry, if anyone asks.
I don't know if I've heard that question.
I actually wanted to build a BlackBerry app for one of our previous apps, but my boss shut it down, which I thought was quite interesting. But yeah, so what platforms should you be targeting if you're building something on mobile or thinking about mobile design?
So for AddJam, we're a two-man team. We typically lead on iOS. We find the tools better, just the workflow, and we can ramp up to something, get through all the discovery of what the customer needs and get prototypes and iterate on it much faster than we could on Android. The hurdle there is distribution on iOS is a nightmare, but
I thought they solved all of that with TestFlight, haven't they? We're buying TestFlight?
it's not great.
Really?
It's better, but
Okay.
so we've got iOS, then you get Android, and as you say, the other platforms, but then another one is what about cross-platform? Yep. Typically we don't do that because what does interest me is something like React Native, where you can do 85% of the code base shared between the platforms. Then you do the sprinkle and you tailor it to that use case. So Android has got a back button, iOS doesn't, but it's got a swipe and action bar or tabs are down the bottom. Simple things that are on the platform.
So why don't you do that? So why don't you do cross-platform? Because in theory, it should cost less, in theory, than doing it on both.
Well, that's
right?
where I think each platform has its own experience that you want to respect the platform. I wouldn't go and get a poster for a billboard and then put that into a print magazine. I would, each platform is different. So, and then if you're on iOS, you've got a fingerprint scanner. You don't get that on Android.
Like on some Samsung Galaxies you do.
Oh, well, not my Nexus. So the platforms are different. What you've got to work with is different. So you can't just tar it all. Yeah.
I think the cross-platform tools, they're definitely interesting. There's definitely a place for them. I think for a lot of projects, they make a lot of sense. If you're looking at something that's particularly bespoke, like a game where your whole interface is actually custom, I think you'd be crazy not to be considering using something like Unity. And then Xamarin is a tool that we've worked with in the past for cross-platform development. It's great if you're wanting to do like the underlying kind of core logic shared, that sort of business logic. I mean, that 85% you referred to, right? I mean, hard to put a percentage on it. It's definitely going to vary project to project. There's definitely savings to be made by using these tools, but you do lose something in doing so as well. The platforms do have differences, as you spoke about, and it's...
Are there broad rules to deciding, whether you should consider cross-platform or a specific platform? Are there, particular rules that you follow by?
Yeah, I mean, we've tended to take it case by case. I don't think we'd apply a kind of fixed rule set on that. It comes down to, if you're really wanting to target a wide range of platforms, if you know that you have a user base on, Windows Phone, on probably not BlackBerry, but, and you maybe want to be able to target other things like Surface or Windows as well. The cross-platform tools are interesting. But I think if you're looking for really apps that take full advantage of the operating system, of the platform themselves, then it's often worth investing in independent apps.
Okay, and separate apps. Okay, let's talk about approach, and let's talk about generally how you go about designing for mobile. So how's it different from designing for desktop, and and what are the tools and that you would use differently for designing for mobile?
So AddJam, we start with a pen and paper. It's simple as that. You just draw, and we'll progress to higher fidelity prototypes and something that people can touch and use and iterate. But when you're doing it for mobile, you need to consider, as I said, it's something that's not connected all the time. It's a smaller screen. Now you've got the challenge of different screen sizes and not even just size, but shapes, like your iPhone 4 size, iPhone 5.
So how do you deal with that? I mean, you've essentially got now multiple, even just designing for iOS itself, we've got, there's 3GS if you really wanted to support that. There's 4, there's 5, there's 6, and 6 is 6S.
6 Plus as well. So,
6
yeah.
Plus.
Yeah,
and then there's iPad.
Yeah, I mean, they used to make it super easy, and in fact, it's a pain that they used to make it super easy, just because the legacy that brings. Like if you're working on older apps and you keep seeing Apple introduce these new screen sizes, and you always had to deal with that on Android, right? So that was, and that's fine. You just always had to deal with it, and Android had very good tools for dealing with it. Whereas on iOS they didn't, because they only had one screen size. And then as they introduced more, they started ramping up the tools to allow you to develop interfaces which were adaptive. Now they're at a point that it's great. However, if you've come from a code base where it wasn't great, there were pain points in getting there.
So
but in terms of like the actual design
that,
for that, I mean, the tools are definitely getting better, right? Like things like Sketch now let you, which is a really good graphics program, if an alternative to Photoshop, essentially, if people hadn't used it before. It's got resizable artboards, and you can start using tools like that to have snap points, so interface elements move appropriately. So you can start previewing it. I mean, the other thing is this is a problem that we've always had on web.
Yes.
So if you're coming from a web background, this shouldn't be a new problem. And now where web development is, and everybody should be adapting to mobile device sizes. The prevalence of them, you can't really just have a desktop site anymore. I mean, maybe some things make sense for that, but it's really hard to think of examples of what makes sense for that. So I don't think it's a new problem. It's a new problem if you've exclusively developed for iOS, but otherwise it's something we've always had to account for.
And Michael, but what about user testing tools? Do you, presumably you test, usability testing is much more different.
I would actually add to, so I largely agree with Michael. Like the approach that we take, definitely encourage starting with pen and paper and before jumping into actual pixel precision kind of high fidelity mocks. But I would say before even that, our approach would be actually figuring out what the problem is you're trying to solve.
Right.
So we definitely start with figuring out what it is we're actually trying to achieve. We don't like to make too many assumptions, so actually finding out what problems users are facing, doing research into that. I mean,
example?
I mean, so the methods that you'd use for that, right? I mean, there's a whole load of ways you can find out what problems people are facing. I mean, face-to-face interviews, you can invite people in to your office or whatever. You can go out on the street, you can just speak with people. You can do surveys. I mean, if you've got an existing product as well, there's hopefully you've got some analytics that can give you some insight. So these are all methods of finding out what problems people are facing. And then we really try and delve into that problem. And we do that with a cross-functional team, trying to actually pull together multiple stakeholders. I would strongly encourage not restricting that to designers. There's great insights that you can get from all members of your development team. Or also other people who are not developers at all. So
how do you go about managing those sessions?
So
you can imagine, let's say a room of 5, 6 people all having different ideas about what this one thing should do.
Yeah, effectively post-it notes is the key for that. Okay. But no, something that people should check out is Google have documented an approach around what they call design sprints. Okay. And these are kind of really focused 1 week or 3 days to 1 week kind of time periods that you're really taking a team, a cross-functional team, and you're delving into one problem and trying to come up with a solution. It's a really good approach. I mean, you start with really just exploring the problem. You then start diverging designs, so exploring lots of different ways that you could try and solve that problem. Again, this is very similar to Michael. This is super low fidelity. You're looking at sketches. You're looking at just throwing ideas out there, and you're getting kind of feedback from the team and seeing what approach you all like aspects of. You shouldn't be just pick one of them and go with it. It's really trying to bring all those ideas together and converge them back into something. And then off the back of that, you want to do user testing around that idea and make sure that you're actually, your assumptions, because they are assumptions at that point, are correct and validated by how users actually find that idea. And we're talking super low fidelity prototypes again. There's tools like Marvel, which you can just take photos of your sketches and turn it into a tappable prototype. Using tools like that, it's super easy to get things together for people to actually play with and test and get really good insights.
Yeah, because I was using InVision and have had a look at which allows you to create and build little kind of interactive prototypes, not only on desktop, but then being able to do that on mobile.
Yeah.
And they've hooked that up with lookback.io, which allows you to use the camera to see what the user's reaction is whilst they're using it, so that you don't have to be staring at them the whole time, which is always awkward.
It's a really good tool, actually. There's an embarrassment of riches, really, when it comes to prototyping tools at the moment. It's a really, really hot area of development. So there's something like InVision is really, really super fast to use, and as that new addition is really cool. But then there's also Marvel, which is great if you're doing sketches, but it's very similar to InVision otherwise. And they've also got a user testing, like video recording method as well now. And then Pixie or Proto.io, there's a whole range of them, and they cover, you can get super in depth with those. Like some of them are really, really rich. Kind of, you can basically make it feel like a real app. And you don't always want to do that. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that at the start anyway. But if you want to get into depth with actually prototyping, like neat interactions or animations and gestural stuff, you can do that with things like Proto.io and Pixie. Whereas if you want to keep it simple, use something like InVision or Marvel. Yep,
great. So, so we've got 5 minutes before I'm going to open up to Q&A. So please think of your questions and think about what you would like to ask. So now we'd like to get a bit personal, a little bit more personal, and talk about experiences you have in personal experiences in designing for mobile. So here's an interesting one. What's the biggest mistake that you've learned that you've made in designing for mobile, and what happened and what did you learn from it? We'll start with you, Michael.
Oh, thanks. So,
no client names, I think.
Yeah, I think yeah. So last year we had a project we're working on that we built it in a way where we did a prototype in 2 weeks, so we were very quick iterations, and that kind of set a bad expectation of where the product was going and how it could.
In that the client thought it was going to be.
Yeah, thought
amazing.
It would be done in another 2 weeks.
Oh,
yeah,
All right.
I've been there. I feel your pain.
So it was a really rough prototype just to get check some technical stuff out. Is this technically feasible? Interaction-wise, like what is the flow of people? And we're collecting a lot of data. It was a data gathering app. Going back to that, using sensors on the phone. And there was trying to judge a level of what we could collect, how we could collect it, efficiency, and so we were focusing on the technical stuff, and they just sort of finished up. They didn't realise that it wasn't secure, it was just we're working on, which then led us to being given more work, but more work, and we ended up just drowning and not being able to achieve what we'd set out to achieve because we couldn't manage expectations of of the process that we were going through. So I've got like one of the slides is the Lean Startup book, so we're trying to iterate very quickly. And they weren't set up for working with us in that way. Yeah.
So how would you do that differently? This, you know, if another client came along with a similar proposition.
I guess I would handle expectations differently, and the distribution of a beta build, we wouldn't be as open and giving it to anyone. We would be more choosy about how we go about that.
This comes with massive caveats as you open it, like alerts. This is not final. We're not done yet.
Yeah. Like put Comic Sans all over it and make it as ugly as possible so they can't possibly be happy with it. That would be a good way.
And but I mean, it hits upon a really difficult thing, which is how do you describe those intangible things around security, you know, and trying to get that across, and how that it's not being tested very well for a wide range of circumstances, right?
Yeah.
Yep. And Duncan, what's your biggest mistake that you've made and learned from?
Probably a few I could go into. I'd say probably over designing in a way. So I think there's a real risk, particularly in if you're in a consultancy or agency and you're working with clients, that they kind of want to see everything documented, right? And it's not a very efficient way of working, right? Where you're actually kind of trying to design everything up front. A much more effective way, I mean, hopefully most people here are familiar with kind of agile approaches, and I don't know if anyone here went to Jeff Gothel's workshop yesterday on Lean UX, but that was, you know, it's really focused on more efficient ways of delivering and working within a team. And with mobile design, like what we should really be looking at is designing the least possible to get started, and then building and learning. Because when we try and design everything up front, we inevitably make mistakes. We're building based on assumptions. We're trying to think of edge cases which are either fairly inconsequential or will definitely come out in the wash and can be dealt with at the time. Trying to design it all up front is inefficient and it's inflexible. And frankly, like it's not always the designer who's best positioned to actually think of those things. Like, the engineers are probably better placed to actually find these edge cases and come up with the solid solutions to those.
So what happens if you've got an app which requires quite a bit of, you know, functionality before it, you know, it's an MVP with a minimal viable product? How would you go about dealing with that? Because it's easy, I think, finding things which are which, you know, you could deliver in especially in regards to prototypes, but having worked in a big organization where we've had people saying, no, we definitely need all of these things.
Yeah.
and it's very difficult for us to prioritize or to imagine what that final thing would look like with that, you know, in an incremental fashion. What kind of advice could you give around that if people are dealing with that issue?
I think that is quite common, actually. You know, that there's people get quite close to or fixed on the idea of what their overall vision for something, and they kind of don't see a way to trim that down. But I think you almost always can, and you really do want to try and find those thin slices that you can build. You don't have to ship it, right? You don't have to actually. If it's really like not valuable yet, you know, you don't actually have to put it out on the app stores or whatever. But build it so that it's there and you can build upon it and you can test it. Trying to, you know, design everything up front, have this holistic system that's gargantuan, and then build it all before you do anything with it. You know, like build the whole thing and it doesn't work until it's finished is an exceedingly dangerous way to develop software.
Okay. That's great. I thought we would open up to Q&A. So do we have a microphone?
Just 10 minutes, we need to finish 9:35. Mind?
Oh, okay. Oh no. Okay. All right.
Get them in quick.
10 minutes of Q&A then. Okay, anyone got a question? Great.
Sort of talk about reuse. How much reuse do you sort of see across solutions that you're building, maybe different clients or
You're probably best placed for this one.
Yeah, cool. So for AddJam, we've got two things, I guess, are relevant to that. One is we try and open source. We extract everything out into a point we can open source it. We've actually been doing not mobile work recently. We've done this a lot with. We've been using Ember.js for a web project we've got going on, and we've open sourced about 5 or 6 packages for that, which is good for us because it's a content marketing tool. People use it and test it for us and tell us what's broken, and then sometimes actually fix it, which is great.
The free QA department, huh?
It's great. So yeah, we do that. It helps us in the future, and it helps the community because we use a ton of open source stuff anyway. Secondly, with the project, which is one of the slides again, was Glasgow City Council. We built them a platform for making information-based apps. So the sort of stuff you typically get in a pamphlet in a tourist information place. So that platform, they've got a web backend that they can go and put all the data in, and then we can spin up apps for them very quickly. So the reuse in that is very high because we've been able to extract out a lot of the UI variables. So you can pick your colours and your logos. Like everything is just drop it in. It literally takes like 2 days of work of time to iterate a new product out. And that's on both platforms, so they can make multiple apps on Android and iOS. I guess between the two platforms, we don't use any code over again. It is starting from scratch.
That was just 2 days. I'm just blown away. So that is a fast turnaround time for an app. Don't tell potential clients that.
Yeah.
That's too fast.
Then it has to go to Apple, so it takes a
That's
week.
true.
You know?
That's true.
2 weeks.
Yeah, one thing I would add to that, which isn't maybe quite the same thing, but when it comes to designing, if you use as many system standard components as possible, it reduces the cost of doing things significantly. So when it comes to reusable, like you get a lot out of the box for free. I mean, it's not for free to develop, but like when it comes to design, if you use these things, users are familiar with them. If the operating system changes, you don't have to go and fix your broken code. You know, they update these things and you get it cheap. So I would strongly encourage using system standard components when you're designing, and if you're not gonna, have a good reason for it.
Great. Next question. Anyone? Yep.
So I come from a company where we have a portfolio of products that were designed for desktop, and they've been used on desktop for many years. And we talked about the challenges that you face when you're going to build a mobile application. How do you get a team of developers that are used to working in a desktop environment from, I've got to design for mobile, to, yeah, we're going to design for mobile?
So just to repeat the question, it's how do you get developers who are used to working in desktop environments to being super excited about working on mobile rather than being bogged down by the challenges?
Yeah. Well, working on mobile is a pleasure, largely. Are you talking about native development, or is this mobile web? Mobile web, okay. So it's maybe a little bit less of a pleasure, but yeah, that is probably a challenge. I would have thought it was actually quite a good challenge for people. I would have thought they would have actually found it to be quite a release from working to this, like, you know, this huge screen size. And I think the trend generally with web is going, you know, a lot more white space, a lot less kind of huge breadcrumb navigation and elaborate structures around that. So I think generally if you're going towards designing for mobile, it often benefits the desktop too. So I think it's hopefully an opportunity for you guys to look at simplifying the desktop experience and finding hopefully not designing specifically mobile web and specifically desktop. You should be trying to find ways to make adaptive, responsive sites. So hopefully a chance to improve on desktop as well.
Is there something around mobile applications being, you know, very specific for one particular thing versus desktop apps? In your case, presumably a product which is could be described as relatively complex and with a lot of functionality. So how do you make that transition?
Yeah.
And if there is one, would you kind of pick specific functionality?
If you were looking to do apps, yeah, I think apps generally, people have an expectation that it's, you don't have to recreate every bit of functionality in your website and in your native app. You should be focusing on what it is users want to achieve. They tend to dip in and dip out, right? Whereas with web, it's kind of, oh, I need to find this particular thing. I'll chuck it in at Google, and I need a page to load as a result of that. So I think when it comes to mobile web, you're probably still kind of a little bogged down with people have an expectation that they can still get that content, but they don't with apps, right? They don't expect it to be a wrapper for your website, and if you've done that, then you've done it wrong.
Okay. I think we've got time for one more question before we wrap up. So anyone with the burning question? Go.
Would you design differently for a responsive website versus an app? Because we've been talking a lot about apps, but I know, well, from my experience with users, many of them don't like downloading things on the phone, the web, so how would you separate the design, or would you expect them to see things and tools?
Did everyone hear that? So the question was, how do you design for responsive and on mobile web compared to mobile apps? Brilliant. Okay.
So I think it's that thing of if I had a billboard and then I had a print magazine, I wouldn't use the same stuff twice. It's a different. So a mobile app gives you an opportunity to make a different experience that's worthwhile for the user to download it. So the example of the buses, if I go on the bus website, it wouldn't know I'm at that bus stop, whereas if the bus stop's got an iBeacon in it, they can do positioning and it can be more useful to me. But at the same time, that isn't the same for every product. So I don't have the Facebook app installed. I don't really use Facebook, but I just go on the mobile website. So the mobile website is indistinguishable from the app, and once you're at that point, I agree. What's the point in having the native app if you can? But then if I was wanting to read the news, if I was going on the underground, I would probably want something that's a native app so I can cache it, or as I say, having the experience of using the device to give me a better experience.
Yeah, it's got to have that, right? If it's an app, you've got to convince the user to install it, right? And I agree, like, that's not always an easy sell. I think a lot of things, they don't need to be an app. If it's something that someone uses, like retail, right? Retail often does not need an app because if I'm going to go and buy a bed or something, I don't do that frequently. I'm not going to install an app for a furniture shop, right? So in those cases, I would say you definitely want to stick with web rather than an app. And we've certainly seen in the past, when we were working as an agency in the past, we spoke to a lot of clients who would want an app, but I think a lot of the time it's kind of vanity. It's an expectation that we should have an app, but there's really no purpose in it. Apps generally, I kind of think of them more as if there's utility in it. Like it tends to be something someone wants to achieve something. It's not kind of informational so much, right? I wouldn't have the Wikipedia app installed, although there is a Wikipedia app and it's actually quite good. But
you wouldn't install the Scottish Government app, for instance, right?
Sorry, Kate. I probably wouldn't.
That's very sad for us.
You never know. Maybe you could find the single use utility that I need from the Scottish Government and make an app for that. But generally, I think that when it comes to mobile web, you want to be it's really important to be searchable because that's how a lot of people are going to come across that content. Whereas with an app, it's more about what is a purpose, like what is the utility a user wants to get at, and delivering that efficiently.
Great. So I thought we'd just wrap up with one last question. So very briefly, have you got a one-line piece of advice for anyone that's looking to design for mobile? Michael?
Go. Just do it, do something. Get a pen and paper and start there, or get Sketch, as Duncan was saying, and just start doing stuff and giving it out to people. You learn from doing.
Okay, and Duncan?
I would say test. User test things, really get out there. With mobile, it's so handy. It's on a device, it's in your hand. You can just walk out into the street, go to a coffee shop, buy someone a coffee and say, hey, can you check this out? So if you're like wanting to get some feedback, it's so easy to do with mobile.
Great. So, well, we'll wrap our session up. So if we could give a big hand to both Duncan and Michael, then that'd be great.
Thank you.
Great.